Good afternoon. Welcome. I'm Raisa Rodriguez, Chief Program and Policy Officer at FPWA. Welcome to our last session in our three-part series, An Hour of Power with Women Leading the City, commemorating Women's History Month. For 100 years, FPWA has served its membership and network and New Yorkers at large with a laser focus on achieving racial and economic justice, strengthening low-income communities, eliminating barriers to upward mobility, and fighting entrenched poverty. We foster economic equity in three critical ways: advocating for policy changes that improve the lives of New Yorkers, supporting nonprofits with critical capacity building, and strengthening individuals and families by strengthening targeted financial supports to help thousands of New Yorkers meet basic needs. Today, we'll hear an intimate conversation between our president and CEO, Jennifer Jones-Austin, and New York City's Deputy Mayor for Health and Human Services, Ann Williams-Isom. Again, I'll say today, while we hear from New York City women leaders in positions of power, we hear their journey, their personal vision for equity in New York City. We do so while being incredibly mindful of the immeasurable role women in New York play day in and day out. They are our mothers, our daughters, our sisters, paving the way in households facing economic and housing insecurity, doing essential work even before the pandemic and economic crisis, and fighting each day to make ends meet. Thank you so much for joining us today for this powerful conversation. Jennifer, I'll turn it to you.
Thank you, Raisa, and it's good to be with all of you. I have enjoyed these conversations, the two that we've had to date, and I am anticipating that I'm going to enjoy this one as well. This conversation is a very special one. It's unique in a very important and a special way. And that's because this conversation is with Deputy Mayor Ann Williams-Isom, also in my world known as my ride or die, my BFF. And so it's going to be a very special conversation. I can tell you that I have a lot of interviews. I do radio, and I'm really usually very good at them. But today I'm feeling a little bit like Gail, and like it's a Gail Oprah moment, right? Like where Gail is interviewing Oprah. And so I'm gonna be Gail, and Ann in every respect is, she's an Oprah in her own right. She is an accomplished lawyer, an accomplished educator, government administrator, not-for-profit executive. She has most recently added to her list of credentials and accolades, a chair at the Fordham University School of Social Work, a professor. She is all things phenomenal woman. And I'm just delighted that she's here with us, and she's going to spend some time with us this afternoon, sharing her journey, sharing her vision, and just helping us to appreciate why she does what she does. So welcome, Ann.
Thank you, Ms. Jennifer Jones-Austin. And I think I too am coming to this conversation with some anxiety. And I think it's because our worlds, do intertwine so much, and because this is so important to us, our personal relationship, as well as this work that we have taken on relating to justice and equity, especially for our communities. And so it's an important conversation. I'm just really happy to have it with you. And Raisa said an intimate conversation. We're going to try to not make it so intimate. So we're going to have to remember that people are watching us. But yeah, I'm very, very excited to be here.
Just remember if I do this,
exactly. And you said I had an additional thing that I was the Dumpson chair. But you forgot to say that in 2018, I got my doctorate in ministry from the New York Theological School. So something I wanted to go back and do to really figure out how theology and ministry fits into the work that we did. So I wanted to say that, because I think that's another thing that really connects us and the work that we do in the world.
Absolutely. And in addition to holding your doctorate, you have a law degree from Columbia University, and your undergraduate degree is from Fordham University. So yes, you are credentialed and experienced up. And one might think that you just did everything, kind of like in stair steps, and you had it all plotted out. And that's not always how things go. And so what we'd like to do is first have a conversation, hear from you about your journey to leadership and your journey in leadership. I'm going to remind you that several years ago, back in the early 2000s, you and I went to a child welfare conference. And let me just back up and say, we met at ACS. You and I were a part of a team of maybe no more than 20 persons that came, that went to work at ACS when the agency was just being created.
Yes.
When child welfare in New York City was in a shambles, and we had to rebuild child welfare. And you and I had the unexpected experience, which became just kind of the glue for working together and sharing an office.
Well, you interviewed me actually when I was leaving my law firm, and I decided that I wanted to go into government, didn't know exactly what that would be. And I think there was a friend of mine that might have worked at Simpson Thacher that knew Kate, and I can't remember Kate's name right now, and gave my resume to you and Jerry Harris. So I came in, and I think I had a 2.5-year-old and an 8-month-old at the time, and was looking to do a change in my career from working, both my husband and I were working 80 hours a week. And I just felt like if I was going to spend that amount of time away from my children, I wanted it to do something in a field where I felt more connected and can do some work. And so I came and you interviewed me, and I think I was interviewing for a deputy chief of staff position at this newly formed Administration for Children's Services.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I'm not going to try to take credit that I gave you your start, because you had your start a long time before. But maybe in some other context, some other place in space I might. But look at you. Look at, like you began your journey in government in child welfare, and now you're back in government as Deputy Mayor for Health and Human Services. That's tremendous. That's huge. And for many people who are listening in and learning, they have ambitions to, be at the highest levels in their organizations, in government. Help us to appreciate kind of the journey. But before you go there, let me just remind you of something. You and I went.
Oh yeah, sorry, go ahead.
We went to Baltimore. We went to a conference in child welfare, and we had an opportunity to sit and hear from Elijah Cummings, who talked to us, this is not ringing a bell, about the footnotes in life. He talked about how people will read your resume, and they will read that, you worked in this organization and you had this experience and you accomplished that. And what they don't often have a good sense of, because it's not going to appear on your resume, on your CV, you're not going to be introduced with these things when people read your bio. Footnotes in life, those experiences that help you to get to where you are today, the things that people will not know about, but that were so impactful.
Yeah.
That set you on your course. Tell us about some of those.
Oh my goodness. You want me to tell you about the footnotes now or during my conversation? Okay, so I kind of remember the conversation, but I will say that at every stage of my life, the footnotes will be the names of the people that I've met that influenced me at that moment. Mostly from my time at ACS, it will be the name of the parents from the Parent Advisory Board who really taught me what it was like to be impacted by child welfare, because I had no idea, right? I wouldn't have understood that from the 18th floor. So until I had time to meet with people in communities and to meet with parents who actually had their children removed from them, that I would have the footnote of those names, mostly Black women, who influenced my life and changed things that I wouldn't want to have seen, changed the way that I saw the world. I think same thing, let's say at the Harlem Children's Zone, it will be being Miss Ann. And it'll be the footnotes of the young people who changed my life through every interaction. I don't want to say their names out now, but the Stevens and the Chris's and the Shaniquas who drove me crazy at the time, but taught me lessons that I would have never been able to learn in those so-called credentialed areas that you said that I were. So all of my footnotes, Jennifer, will be the names of people, and people won't know who they were, maybe, but they would have been the people who have so profoundly changed the way that I do this work, that I would not have learned out of a book or from any particular job that I had if I had not met these people and they had affected me in the way that they did. So I think that's what my footnotes would include.
But you didn't start with a blank slate, right? Because one of your enduring footnotes would be your mother. And
Yes, I think that, yeah, but she wouldn't be a footnote. Right?
She'd be a whole chapter. She'd be or the book.
I think she'd be like the foundation of the whole book, right? And and we laugh about that. And I know people are sick of me telling the story, but my mom is the youngest of 14, and her mother died within, we don't really know, within a month or so of her birth. Right? Who can imagine what that must have been like to give birth in the, I'm going to say it was the hills of Marival in Trinidad and Tobago, and to not have the maternal health care that she would have needed so that she could be healthy, birthing 14 children kind of back to back. My grandfather couldn't take care of my mom and the brother who was right next to her, which my Uncle Frankie, who was 2. So they placed both my mom and my Uncle Frankie into what I understand now is foster care, but it was with the nuns in Port of Spain. So she grew up in an orphanage. And so her career became, she was a registered nurse. And so she stayed there until she was 24 years old. She knew where her family was. Well, I don't know what we would call that, like an open adoption. So they would come and they would visit her, but she always really did not feel as connected to her brothers and sisters as she wanted to. So she came to this country, she got married when she was in Trinidad, had 2 children, left her 2 children here. And this is a story that many immigrants have, but she was the working woman in the house with this RN degree, came to the United States, settled in Queens, New York, and started getting jobs at Queens General Hospital, at Mary Immaculate Hospital in Queens, at Long Island Jewish, where often she will talk about being the only Black woman who was working there, trying to make money for her family to bring her family over. She was pregnant with my brother Stephen at the time. So Stephen, even though he was born here, says that he's really Trinidadian and he should have both of those nationalities. She very quickly became a victim of domestic violence. We could talk about why and how, was she making more money? Was she more out in the world? Were there things that my father, as a Black man coming to this country, who he drove a taxi cab, what was happening with him, and what all of that would have, how that lent itself to the difficulties that they had, how that affected the 4 of us in that household. They got a divorce by the time that I was 6. And if it wasn't for the nuns at St. Catherine's of Siena and my neighbors, who many a times called 911 when they were hearing things in the household smashing and crying and all kinds of stuff, that came together and protected the 4 of us, how would our journey have been different? So when I take my mom's story, she could be a chapter of all of those things about how did I get interested in children and families? How did I strongly believe that women need to have a equitable wage? How I knew that if my mom didn't have a career, this story would have been very different from her. She was able to buy her house. We were able to settle in Queens. If she didn't have connections to the church and the schools, that, when we couldn't pay our bills and when we didn't have enough money for our uniforms, the nuns made sure we had what we needed. I think it has really informed my perspective about what children and families and individuals need. And about how social services should look like for children and families in New York City and all around the nation, honestly. And we'll get to it later, but even this experience of COVID, Jennifer, you know that my mom is 91 years old and she lives with us now. So the experience of when you have an intergenerational household and how COVID really hurt Black and Brown communities at disproportionate effects, right? I've had 31 family and friends who have died of COVID, and how my family and I really tried to keep my mom safe, right? But even within that, the isolation that she went through and how she's aged, so rapidly over these couple of years, and how we still want to keep her safe, has informed now, as I'm a deputy mayor over Health and Human Services and COVID recovery and the Department of the Aging, a sense of perspective that I would not have gotten in some ways if I haven't seen how really all parts, developmental parts of our family was affected by COVID-19 in this recovery. So that she gets more than just a chapter. She gets the whole book, which she and I are still working on, because we don't know what the end of that chapter is going to look like for both of us. But how do we even prepare ourselves and our families for that in a way that's got dignity and all of those other kind of things, which we could come back and talk about another time. But that was a really long, I didn't talk about a journey. I talked about the journey of my mom and
No, but that's part of your journey. That's who you are. And,
yes.
Let's pick up on one other aspect that you didn't lean into, but that you have been leaning into over the course of the last several years. That being mental health. Your doctorate centers on, like mental health and well-being. As you talked about domestic violence, as you talk about conversations with parents and with children.
Yeah.
In your portfolio as
Yes.
Deputy Mayor for Health and Human Services is, the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene.
Yes.
And you have been centering increasingly on mental health issues.
Yes. And so I think at the Harlem Children's Zone, when I saw that we had these wonderful comprehensive services, connections with the community, the gap that I really saw was that we really didn't even say the word mental health. They were so taboo. And there were so many moms or dads and young peoples where I could see that was right underneath the surface, right? People would bring children to me that they wanted to expel from the school. And I'm like, okay, but wait, did we give Johnny what he needed? And, there's other things going on there. Or the mom is so angry, or the dads don't want to comply. And when you really looked under the surface, Jennifer, and you know that I say this all the time, not so much for just the people that we were serving, but for the employees, all of us, from the CEO and me, all the way down to the people we were serving, unidentified or unaddressed issues, mental health issues within the full continuum. And you know that I'm not a person who's like, everything has to be, there's a pathology around it. But I think that there is something really to be said about wellness and about understanding your emotions and how you deal with your emotions. And obviously trauma for me, that this idea of adverse childhood experiences became very, very important when I did a community of practice pilot with Nadine Burke Harris, where we actually started to test our young people at the Harlem Children's Zone to see what their ACEs score would be. And you won't be surprised to know that 40% of our young people had an ACE score of, I think it was like 8 or higher. And that was kind of, we know it was much higher because we were doing it and people were self-disclosing, and children and their families. And so when I thought about concentrated poverty, concentrated trauma, collective kind of the experience and communities, I became very interested in what was the role of healing and wellness in that. I stayed away from the word mental health a little bit because I didn't want to freak people out, because everybody was like, Miss Ann, I don't need therapy and I don't need this. And I was like, I'm not saying that we all need therapy, but we all need to think about what's coming up from that and how does that keep us from being our best selves. So I think at the Harlem Children's Zone, Jen, was when I really started to focus on that and to not want to make it pathological, but to build into the organization this idea of wellness for the community, for parents, but also for employees. And that's what I wrote my dissertation about. And I think now that I come to the city, I'm so happy to have Dr. Ashwin Vasan, who is his specialty. I know you know, Dr. Vasan is mental health. And so he's thinking about it again from a full continuum of what that looks like for children in schools, for those amongst us that have serious mental illness, for what should our Office of Community Mental Health look like today, and help me think about that a little bit, and just really think about all the work that's going on in the Department of Health and how we should be a leader in the city about as we move through this recovery, and especially in communities of Black and Brown people.
Wow. So as I listen to you, I can't help but think that all of the journey, personal and professional journey that you've been on allows you to come to government at a very critical point in time. And knowing you, bring your whole self, right? Now that's a big deal. That's a big deal. And I'm just gonna say, as women and as women of color,
right?
Like, I want to talk a little bit about why government, why now, and I want to talk about how you're showing up in this moment, and your vision.
So I want to say, and you have said this to me before, you said you're bringing your whole self to this work, and I'm not so sure about that. I think that, only because it could be true, but I haven't completely embraced that for myself, because I think there's lots of more parts of me that I don't show, that I don't share. And I know particularly for women, I don't know, I don't even want to say this word. What does it mean to be authentic? I kind of feel like it's becoming a tag word, like hashtag self-care. And the idea of being fully whole and fully authentic feels like a lifetime journey to me. So I don't know that I can completely claim that and then completely claim that I am completely whole at work.
So let me give it back to you a little bit. When
Okay.
I talk about bringing your whole self, I'm talking about bringing your experiences and how they've informed you.
Okay.
And informed how you think about things, how you
love that. Okay. Okay.
It's not that you are fully matured and fully developed, but you know, you're not leaving your blackness behind.
Okay.
You're not leaving behind your experience as a woman,
yes.
a woman who has experienced struggle and strife.
Yep.
And you're bringing that to bear.
Okay, I like that. And I love that we're doing that definition, because I get nervous sometimes when we talk about, I show up fully and I'm like, oh, well, you know, I don't know that that's completely happening, but yes.
And if you showed up fully every day, we'd be having issues. So let's just leave it there.
Well, and you know, we have
women, call me saying, okay,
no, but you know what? We have women who are watching this, or people. So I want to be clear that I'm not telling everybody just go in there with the blockbusters and be your full self, right? Okay. Right. So that's the caveat. Right. Why government? I think I've always been interested in going back to government, but it also just wasn't in the forefront of my mind completely. You know, we have good friends, Ron Richter, Jess Danhauser, you know, and we've always thought about, oh, should we go back to government one day? And what would that be like? And would it be X, Y, and Z? And so I think it's always been in the back of my mind, because I think service and public service is just, you know, one of the most important things that I've done. So I think the time, I mean, it probably like with everyone during COVID, being at Fordham, being able to teach there, being able to write there, being able to be with young people who are going into this field, being able to reflect on my 11 years at the Harlem Children's Zone and my 13 years in child welfare was a really important 18 months for me. And I think emotionally and physically, I got to exhale a little bit, which sounds strange because it was during a pandemic, but I just even spending that time with my family in the way that we all did, and really trying to figure out, what do you want in your life right now? So at 58, what do I want my life to be like? And what would that be? I knew that wouldn't be the Harlem Children's Zone wouldn't be my last thing, and Fordham wouldn't be my last thing, but I had no idea that the next thing that I would be called to do would be the Deputy Mayor of Health and Human Services. And so I think, Jen, one of my sister deputy mayors said this to me, that she was so amazed about how many of us who are here now, that's not what we were thinking that we would do. Like, oh, can we do that job? That job seems pretty big for me. I'm not sure I can do that job. So sort of the doubt that came in at first about, I don't know, I think that feels too big for me. So I want to be honest about that I wasn't like, when I grow up, I want to be deputy mayor. That's not what I was thinking. But I think feeling that this was such an important time after all that we have seen, the disparities, people were talking about things they hadn't been talking about before, social justice. I mean, this administration having a mayor that really talks about equity, that talks about communities have been left behind. It felt like an opportunity and a challenge that I was prepared for based on everything that came previous to my career.
And so, as you're now 3 months into the role, right? 3 full months, right? Yes. You've completed your first quarter.
But not first 100 days. Not first 100 days yet. Soon first 100 days. So I still got things I need to do. Don't get me in trouble.
Somebody came up with that first 100 days, and everybody's been running with it ever since. And you know, sometimes we know that, you know, God built established the earth in what? In
7 days?
6 days, 7 days, right? But you know, nobody's God, and nobody should pretend to be God, right?
Okay, so all right.
Whatever it takes to get it done, that's what it's going to take, right?
Okay, okay.
So you get a pass from me on 100 days.
Okay.
Tell me though, like 3 months in, you know, what do you think are the issues and the issues for individuals and families who are, you know, who continue to struggle, who were struggling before and continue to struggle, coming out of COVID? You know, what do you think are the, you know, the top issues that we need to be centering on as a city? We often hear people talk about recovery, but, you know, we haven't heard people really defining what recovery
look, I got a
Yeah.
pain in my neck, so I'm gonna try to do this because I'm like, all right. I think the word recovery is actually a beautiful word because it means something's happened and you're in the process of recovering, right? Whether it's an illness or whatever, you get a cut and you're putting stuff on it, a balm on it, and it's going to take time to, I'm trying to keep away from the word healing, but to get to a better place. And so, Jen, I might say, what part of our city doesn't need recovery? We've got to think about how do we feel, we've been socially isolated from each other. So even the mere fact of being with each other is taking some initial work. The fear and the anxiety that comes up from us of getting on the subway and feeling safe, of going, how many days am I in the office? Am I not in the office? Do I have a mask on? Do I not have a mask on? Oh my goodness, there's a new booster out. Do I need the new booster? Do I not? It feels like everything is, we're overstimulated in some ways and we're trying to figure it all out. So I think there's an emotional just getting back to what does this, I won't call it normal, but the routines. What are the routines of our lives and how is that changing and how do we get used to it? I think we have to pay attention to that because I think everything feels bigger. So if there's something that happens in the city, people are like, oh, point to it and be like, oh, see, that means no, the restaurants can't open or the businesses are not open or how many people are coming back? How many people are in the trains? We got to get, so everything feels like in these past 3 months, everything has felt, what's the word? Amplified in a way. And so it feels like there's been many crises that have happened that I think the mayor has been just one after the other trying to address. I think between the first, I don't know, month is when those 2 police officers were killed in Harlem. And I think I spoke to you maybe that night when I was on my way home, passing by Harlem Hospital and crying on the phone with you because they were the age of our children, right? And just trying to figure out, well, as we're opening, what are the things, what are the unintended consequences of us opening and how are we going to deal with all of these issues? So I think the issue of public safety and crime and prosperity and how do you get to prosperity and safety so that people can go back to work? I think about kids in schools, so I think this idea of the learning loss that has happened and how do we make sure that we're addressing that? So, I mean, I don't want to go on. I could talk to you about what's in my portfolio, but I would say, Jennifer, I think every part of my portfolio, whether it's aging, whether it's the immigrant affairs, whether it's domestic violence, which we haven't spent a whole lot of time talking about, which is on the rise and trying to think about how do we deal with that. Whether it is the Department of Homeless Services, who I've spent a lot of time on trying to see how many of our brothers and sisters are in subways, are out on the streets, and how do we get back to making sure that they have a place to live first, because I do think that I'm a housing first person, and then child welfare, what is happening there. So I think every part of my portfolio is about the immediate parts that deal with recovery and then the long term. So I will say to you that I think that my vision is to provide stability and security for those places in my portfolio, right? Many that are dealing with the most vulnerable communities in our city, and then taking the lessons of this time to make things better, especially for those communities who have traditionally been left out of a fair recovery.
When we think about those communities having been left out of a fair recovery, one of the things that we center on here at FPWA is, the experience of the human service agencies that are on the ground caring for them and for these persons and families, and the stresses that have presented, stresses that were present before COVID and that were exacerbated during COVID. And so, recovery is going to require, as much, if not more, of the human services agencies, and I guess I'm curious, more will be asked of human service agencies, or so it feels and so it seems. And so, what do you think is the right balance to be struck in terms of relationships? With the community-based organizations and agencies?
Okay, I'm going to try to answer this with some, because there's much I want to say. I think I've been delighted that Deputy Mayor Sheena Wright and I are going to partner on this. What I want to say is that it is clear to me that when things weren't working well, it was the community-based organizations that were in the communities and that stayed there and were the frontline workers and knew where folks were, knew how to get people their PPE, knew how to get people the services that they need, knew how to get people food, and didn't leave, regardless of whether they were getting paid, regardless of whether they had everything that they needed in terms of the PPE that they needed in order to get done. And so it proved to me, Jen, what you and I already know, that they are on the front lines in community, know their people, and are there regardless of whether or not the city at times has stepped away from their responsibility of things as like paying them on time or helping raise the wage or get them the workforce that they need. Also, Jennifer, and you and I talk about this all the time, it's so tricky and difficult for me to have this conversation too, because in many of these agencies, the people who are working there are folks from the community. Right. And so they are not getting the livable wage that they need, or they're not getting the mental health support that they need, or they're not getting the training that they need, but they're out there on their fumes and the fact that they love their community doing this work. I think that the pathology of that needs to stop. And if there's ever a place where we're like, we can't go back to business as usual, I think it's in our relationship with the nonprofit sector. And I just think there's too many, I don't know what has happened. I don't know why over the years it's been the way it is. I would be interested to hear what your theories is. Is it because they serve many Black and brown people or vulnerable people, so nobody cares? You know, because if they were building buildings or if they were doing construction, they would get paid on time. Like, it's very deep. And so I'm anxious about it because I wonder if we can really talk about structural barriers. Can we break down the things that are keeping the respect for this very important sector from government to get to a better place, or is it going to take another 5 to 10 years to get that done? So I am interested in working with the sector and here at City Hall to really talk about dismantling something that's dysfunctional and seeing what we can do better. So I think of it like organization, workforce, and then the individuals that they serve. Because if we would treat them better, they would be able to even give more excellent services to the children and families that we claim that we care about. Am I going to get in trouble? We're going to have to erase that answer.
We're of one accord, and I think that with you in leadership, alongside Deputy Mayor Wright, and as well as Deputy Mayor Torres Springer, along with all of the others who are there. But I'm singling out the three of you in this moment because all of you have experience of working in and with community. You have some lived experience, and you have an appreciation for what the nonprofits do, and and in this city, are best positioned to do. And so I, in this moment, I'm encouraged. I'm encouraged that that there's opportunity for partnership and for growth to realize the system that we need that serves individuals and families. I'm just going to put out here, not to just kind of get along or get by, but to actually get ahead, to do something different than what's been done now, not just for the last 10 years, 20 years, but since the creation of human services and nonprofit organizations. We've got a few more minutes.
And don't just be encouraged, hold us accountable.
Oh, well,
in the loving way that I know that you will. And you mentioned my other sister deputy mayors. I do want to mention Mira and Lorraine, because I think all of us are like, what's not working and how can we do it better? And I love the way that the five of us are working collaboratively. I say to somebody, not just talking about lipstick color, but talking about what needs to happen differently in this city and how can we step up and not be afraid to really address some of these things that haven't been addressed before.
Powerful, powerful. This is exciting. Can we talk for a few minutes? We don't have to get too vulnerable, but let's talk about let's talk about the challenges, because frankly, I'm just going to put it out here.
It's like I'm picking up my water.
Listening to you, speaking with such clarity and sincerity, and as you and I have talked about before, with a great command and authority. People may lean in and say, well, easy for her to do, but not so, right? Not always the case. And so let's just talk for a few minutes about being a woman of color leading. And, when you do show up, are there things that are ever present on your mind? Are there barriers that you find yourself still today having to knock down? Are there these moments where you're sitting there and you're saying, am I really having to live this, in this moment?
So I can't speak to the past 3 months, but I think speaking up to my career before that, I think I'm trying to figure out what angle to come at this from. I don't want, when you say I'm speaking with clarity and command, I wouldn't even say that that's true. I think that
there's the perception though, when if you play us back.
Okay, I'm going to play this black. And I think what I am most clear about is my love and my commitment to my people.
Mm-hmm.
I am not clear about what's the best strategy in order to get that done. Was that the right career move for me? Did I spend enough time? I was thinking about Jennifer, and I said this at a speech last week. When I looked at Ketanji Brown Jackson last week, talk about the fact that she didn't think that she was a good parent because she missed some recitals or missed some games with her children. I really had to sit back and be like, damn, we're hard on ourselves. Like, wow, if we don't have it all right and all figured out, this woman's getting ready to be the first African-American woman on the Supreme Court. And she still publicly felt like she had to reveal to us that she didn't think that she was a good enough mom. Mm-hmm. And so what it reminded me is that those fears and those doubts are right there below the surface. Mm-hmm. I think for some of us, like sometimes I look at you and I was like, Jennifer doesn't have any of those fears and doubts because she's super clear about who she is and whose she is and what she has been purposed to do. I feel like my doubts are always right there. Like, do I belong here? Do I have enough in this moment? Do I, when people are like, I need you to be less Ann, right? So people have 100%, and that this is true, has literally said to me, I need you to be less Ann. I need you to not be Ann on 10. I need you to be, don't start to cry, Ann on 8. And what I said was, I will be Ann on 8 because I think that that's a way that I can serve and that I won't get, cause too much trouble, good trouble or bad trouble. I was like, I won't do anything because I want to be here and I don't want to upset this cart. I'm not that woman that's like, oh, if I can't be myself fully, then I'm not going to be here. That's not me. That's not how I was raised. That's not how my mom is. I don't have role models around me that do that. And so I struggle with taking up space and feeling like, okay, I'm here and I'm going to sit fully here and I'm going to say what's on my mind. I don't always say what's on my mind. I practice, let me write this down. Should I say this now? Should I not say this now? Oh, well, maybe I shouldn't do that. And I think that there is more, that's more of what's happening in my head. A lot of the times that internal kind of, what do you call it? Like if you have an internal regulator, how do I regulate myself? I wouldn't say make myself small, but make myself acceptable so that I can be in the room and I can be at the table. The passion and the clarity comes from, I want to serve, I want to be here, I want to do right by folks. But that's not, I think when I talk about being fully integrated, I don't think I have fully taken up my space and been like, I don't care what anybody says yet, I'm gonna be who I need to be. That's not who I am in my personal relationships as a wife. It's not who I am as a mother. And I don't think professionally I'm completely there yet, but I'm a work in progress and I'm trying.
Okay, well, I'm going to tell you that, and me, this is not just my, I'm just going to put out here, you are enough, right? And I tell you that all the time, you are enough. You've been purposed in this moment. And you are, you're bringing I'm going to say you're bringing your whole self to the table and live into that, right? Because very
Yes.
often women, and especially women of color,
Yes.
hesitate to do that, but you're there because of who you are and because of all of your circumstances. Our former boss, who became a mentor to the two of us, said to us, I am who I am, not despite my circumstances. I am who I am because of my circumstances.
Right. Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And so that's who you are.
Yes.
I want to talk for a minute. We've got a few more minutes. I want you to tell us a little bit about, you've got a very challenging portfolio.
Yes.
Like, no doubt. It's very often, the role of the Deputy Mayor for Health and Human Services is, although it's not talked about, it is to try to solve the problems that other institutions, systems, and structures have created. Government institutions, systems, and structures. When we talk about homelessness,
yes,
if the approach is simply how do we house the people, we're not dealing with the underlying structures that made people, that rendered people without homes in the first place.
Yep.
When we talk about child welfare, if we're only centered on how to make sure the child is safe, and we're not centered on what are the circumstances that made the child unsafe to begin with,
yep,
we're not really addressing the problem. So, I'd love.
And is government the best? I'm trying to figure out who's responsible for solving that problem. Because I'm like, if you leave it to government, I'm not sure where we get to. And so how much do we need to partner with communities, community-based organizations, people to really, everybody's using this word, co-create a solution? So I'm not sure. I hear, but maybe to your point, communities didn't create the problem, so they can't solve it. But I'm trying to figure out how that balance works together. You're like, don't interview me. You know what I mean, Jen? I think that's why government is constantly just trying to whack-a-mole and like, oh, I got to get the people out of the subways. I got to have housing for them right away. Oh, we got to put services around them. I see someone asked a question about why is it so hard for the city to do it? And I'm like, but is it the city, or do we need to work with advocates, and do we need to work with housing? Like, why is it one thing? It's got to be all of those things to figure out what do we need to do and how do we get people to a solution that is sustainable and that they thrive in the way that is best for them. I think the child welfare is the same exact thing. Like, we want to jump into it and do an investigation, but what were the opportunities for us to intervene in so many ways before that we could have done that would have been less traumatic, cost less money, right? Been the right thing for children and families. And then, right, we look at everything as a nail if all you have is a hammer. So I don't know if I have the answer to that question. I feel like I want to really look at from your perspective, this idea of equity, and how at the same time when we're doing services, we're thinking about policies, but we're also looking at structures and starting to really look at data and keep the data so that we can then set some goals for ourselves about what that success looks like, and then to be able to put strategies in place to address that data and those goals. And I think there's got to be some difference, because I think whatever we have been doing thus far hasn't really been working. That's why I kind of appreciate the mayor a little bit when he's like, let's try, if failure, we're going to fail sometimes, but it's because we're going to try new things, and we're going to try to work with everybody's ideas and bring people to the table to see if we can do some different things.
I agree with you. And I think that, we need to center, you and I learned a lot about prevention.
Yeah.
In working at child welfare, excuse me, at ACS together. And I think that same, frame and lens, we need to be looking at prevention, across government functioning. So much of government functioning is reactive and responsive. And if we look at root causes and not just kind of interventions, I think we'll be in a better place. And we're here, the nonprofit sector is here to work with you on that. We've got about 2 more minutes.
Okay.
And no conversation would be complete. No conversation between you and me would be complete if we did not take a moment to talk about the wholeness of ourselves and the importance of balance, professional and, familial. I'm not even going to say so much personal, but family and self-care. And, one of the things that, without getting into too much detail, one of the things you've done very well over the course of your adult life, as a professional, as a daughter, as a wife, and as a mother, is to continuously strive to strike the right balance. And so, there may be persons who are listening in, and as my mother once said to me, she kept telling me, "You can have it all. You can have it all." And then one day she looked at me as I was like rushing out the door with Channing on my hip, and I was like pushing Kennedy into the car, and I had on a suit, and I was getting ready to go give a speech, and she was like, "Maybe you can't have it all." I was like, "Do I really need to hear that right now?" Right? What advice would you give to and then this is Women's History Month. Women are trying to do their thing and be all that they can be. What are the guardrails? And when I say guardrails, I'm not asking you to tell everybody how to do it, because we're still a work in progress ourselves, as you said, trying to figure out. But what are the guardrails? What are the things that women who desire to have balance should hold sacred?
And so I love the fact that you use the word sacred, because I do think that self-care is sacred. I was going to say that I feel at my core, I'm a very selfish person, which means that I'm full of myself. Like I think I do a good job of taking care of myself. And at a very young age, realized that if I was not okay, I couldn't really be okay for other people. And I really want to be there for other people. So I have to take care of myself. I don't love the word balance, Jen, because, I've got 3 kids, 28, 26, and 20. I don't always want to be mom. Sometimes being mom sucks. And so I'm not always leaning into that. I've been married for almost 30 years. We could do a whole thing about, do I want to, be a great wife all the time? And so this idea of what does my fullness of my life look like? I don't necessarily know that it's defined by my roles as mom, as wife, as worker, but I think this idea of what does joy feel like to me? And how do I make sure that I'm just having fun in the roles that I'm doing at any particular time? And I think I have more fun when I feel rested, when I feel like I don't have a stomach ache because I haven't eaten something that just, disagrees with me. When I feel like I look the way that I want to look, right? I put my pearls on for you today. When I'm, for me, going to church on Sunday and praising and doing all kinds of things to me feel good. So I feel like we should do things that make us feel good. And what are the things in your life that you could, maybe you hate exercising, but you're like, you know what, when I went on that walk, I kind of did feel a little better afterwards. I love my Peloton, or I love this, or I love going out with my girlfriends. I think if you can fill your life with more things that feel joyful as opposed to burdensome or like heavy on your back, there's more room. It creates more room for you to have. I said this to somebody the other day. The purpose of us feeling good about ourselves is not so that we could just do more and go back out to work or do this, whatever. It's so that we can live more, that we could love more, that we could learn more. So to me, the fullness, I think that's what self-care is. How do I strive to give myself the life so that I can be more joyful and a warrior when I want to be mommy or not so much mommy when I don't want to be at work and be able to have my head clear so I could make good decisions, to be in the fullness of my emotions, right? Which is anger and sad and lonely and all those, and to express those in the way that feel right. So I think the balance, I don't know if that's the right word, but it's like, who do you want to be? How do you feel that joy? And what are the things that bring you joy? And if it's not being with your kids every Friday night and you want to go out with your girlfriends or do something else, I think you should do that, right? You don't have to be a martyr. And if it's not, I want to have a romantic evening with my husband. Maybe you don't want to do that. Maybe you want to go to the gym. Go do that. I'm just saying, do you, boo? And how do you do you without feeling guilty? Like, right, as Ketanji Judge Jackson, like you're fine. It's okay. I think you've done okay. I think your girls are gonna love you, not all the time. You're gonna be a Supreme Court justice. People's not agree with you, but I think you are enough, as you said. So that's my long-winded answer to, I think it's okay.
It is okay. It's okay. It's more than okay. This has been great.
Woo,
Right? We got through this.
we got through it. Woo, okay.
We may have an after party talk, right?
Exactly.
But I want to say on behalf of all who are here at FPWA and the agencies with which we work, the leaders with whom we work, that we are delighted and excited. We are thrilled, and we are, I'm going to say, encouraged by your leadership, by your presence in city government in this moment, this very critical moment in time.
What we didn't say was, you know, how grateful I am to you and the importance of friendship and sistership and someone who can see you and knows you, that you can be vulnerable with, that you can argue with. The importance of those relationships in order to get women, Black women, all of us to that place where then we can really fulfill our purpose, I think is invaluable. So I know people see us and we joke all the time about being BFFs, but you know, were sent to me so that I could be a better person and I can do this job better. So I just publicly just want to thank you for your brilliance and your beauty and all that you bring to me so that I can be a better person and do this work in the way that I need to. So thank you, Ms. Jennifer Jones Austin.
And I appreciate that. And we always talk about how God purposed us.
Yes.
To be together. Goodness, I guess we'll soon be celebrating an anniversary because we're coming up on, it's over 30, right?
And we also laugh about how she laughs when she sees us together, and we give God a big laugh when she sees the two of us together. So God bless.
Say God's not asking us to do it all. She's just asking us to do our part.
Amen. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, talk to you later.